Welcome to episode 199 in our series of talks on how to understand the King James Bible. If you've never heard our talks before, expect us to go through a section of the King James Bible, verse by verse and word by word, seeking to understand its meaning. Today we're looking at 1 Samuel, the first book of Samuel, chapter 20, beginning at verse 24 and to the end of the chapter, and the subject, a friendship and a parting. My name is Keith Simons. I'm a Bible teacher from England. So, looking at the first book of Samuel, chapter 20, verses 24 to 42, and we see here it's all about David and Jonathan. Jonathan, the son of King Saul. If you know anything about the difference between kings and other types of rulers, presidents and prime ministers, you will know that the main difference is that the son of a king expects to be king after him. So here is Jonathan, the man entitled to be the next king. And here is David, who is anointed and chosen by God to be the next king. And you would think, perhaps, that there would be conflict between these two men, that the one man who considers himself to have a right to become king, that he would strive against the other man whom God has chosen to be the king, but not at all. Jonathan, the son of King Saul, was completely unselfish. He saw David in the battle against Goliath, and he took that young man and trained him, protected him, supported him for the next 10 years, we think, in preparation for David's future as Israel's king. Yes, it was Jonathan who showed David how Israel's government worked. It was Jonathan who introduced David to those who were considered the great men, the powerful people in Israel. It was Jonathan who trained David to be a leader, a commander in the army. And so David acquired the skills that he needed for his future life. What was it that brought these two men together? Well, they had similar attitudes. Whereas King Saul was a fierce man who controlled people by fear, Jonathan and David had a different attitude. We see attitudes of genuine love towards the men whom each of them led. We see their deep trust in God and their expectation that God would work even in situations where their enemies seemed much too strong for them. Yes, they were united in their attitudes. Let's turn now to this section of the first book of Samuel, chapter 20, and as we usually do, we'll go through the verses, studying the meanings and just letting it draw out what this passage is about. We've heard in previous chapters how Saul has been fiercely opposed to David, how he's plotted and tried to kill David on several occasions. Yet until the last few days, David and Jonathan had believed that this was just emotional outbursts from Saul, or how Saul behaved when an evil spirit affected him. But now they're starting to realise that it is a clear plot against David, and that Saul is desperate to kill David. So they make a decision that Jonathan is to go to his father and to test out whether David's life truly is in danger. And that's where we enter verse 24. So David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon was come, the king sat him down to eat meat. David hid himself in the field. As we've seen previously, this phrase, the field, is being used in opposition to the town of Gibeah, where Saul had his capital. What it's saying is that David went not into a particular field, but into the open countryside. And from there, he seems to have gone to Bethlehem, to the place where his family lived, and joined them at their special meal at the time of the new moon. The new moon was the beginning of the month in Israel. The months were calculated by the first appearance of the moon in the sky, and each family would celebrate on that special day, the day of the new moon. They would gather together with their family and have a feast or a special meal. And on that day, the king sat him down to eat meat. Perhaps surprisingly, the word meat in this passage does not strictly in the Hebrew translate as animal food. The literal translation of meat in this passage is bread. The king sat him down to eat bread. But he's not just eating bread as he would do on any other day of the year. It's signifying, as bread is an important part of the meals, that he's gathering for this special meal. He's sitting down to eat there, and he's joining to break bread with his friends and with the important officials in his government. That's what this phrase, sat down to eat meat or to eat bread, signifies. The meal they're actually going to have is an animal which has been killed as a peace offering, as a sacrifice to God. Part of the animal went to the priest, part was burned on the fire as a gift to God, but the main part of the animal, when it was cooked and roasted, it seems, went back to the king and to his guests for them to eat at this special meal. Verse 25. And the king sat upon his seat, as at other times, even upon a seat by the wall. And Jonathan arose, and Abner sat by Saul's side, and David's place was empty. Okay, let's get the seating arrangements right here. We've got the king's seat, the seat by the wall, the seat that everyone knows is for the king. And who sits with him there? Well, normally the place next to the king would go to Jonathan, the king's eldest son, to show how much the king delighted in his eldest son, who would be the king after him. And so that was Jonathan's place by right. But on this particular occasion, Jonathan arose. Jonathan got up from there because someone else needed to speak to Saul. And obviously, if Jonathan had the place, then Saul would not be able to carry out the discussions with him. That other person was Abner, the leader of Saul's army. And Abner wanted to sit with Saul on that day, probably because there were important matters to discuss in relation to the army or to the constant wars which were going on right the way through Saul's rule. So Jonathan, of course, allows Abner to sit there, an example of Jonathan's unselfishness there, but for practical reasons, because that discussion was important. And David's place was empty. Of course it was. David, in fear of his life, has gone out into the open countryside, it seems to Bethlehem. And so, although a place has been arranged for David, he's not there. Now, Saul's attention was not on the matters which Abner, the leader of his army, was discussing with him. Saul's attention and his thoughts were why David was not at that meal, as we see from verse 26. Nevertheless, Saul spake not anything that day. That is, he said nothing about David. For he thought, something hath befallen him, something has happened to David. He's not clean. Surely he is not clean. And that repetition of he is not clean shows how much this is filling Saul's mind. He's thinking over and over to himself, David can't have run away. It can't be true. There's got to be a proper reason why he won't come to this meal. And then he thinks of a reason why David, as a holy man, would not come to that meal. And that is, the meal is the sacrifice of a peace offering to God. And anyone who is ceremonially unclean is not allowed to eat of that peace offering. So Saul concludes, David is unclean for ceremonial purposes. Unclean. What does that mean? Well, all people were unclean for ceremonial purposes at various times. Leviticus chapter 15 verse 16 says that if semen has flowed from a man's body, then he is unclean until the evening. Well, David may have had a flow of semen. He may have had contact with the dead, a funeral. He may have had to attend. He may have been present with someone when they died. It does happen, especially to people in armies when there's a lot of fighting. David could have rescued someone who was injured, and that person died while David was with him. And then David would not have been clean or able for ceremonial purposes to eat that peace offering. Uncleanness does not represent sin. It represents a ritual state, a description of the state of a person who is not fit to join in public worship, and eating that meal as a sacrifice to God is an act of public worship. So Saul concludes that something like this must have happened to David. That meant that David suddenly could not come to that meal. Notice he's not thinking the logical thing. In the end of the previous chapter, we read how Saul was pursuing David, how he attempted to kill David, how Michal, Saul's daughter, who is also David's wife, had arranged for David to escape his life. And then how Saul pursued David to Naioth in Ramah, but was unable to arrest him there because the Spirit of God came upon Saul so powerfully. Saul doesn't think David is fleeing for his life, maybe because David has seen Saul attempt to kill him so many times, and David has returned to Saul. However, that day, Saul asks nothing about David. And then we come to the second day. Verse 27. And it came to pass on the morrow, which was the second day of the month, that David's place was empty. Oh, it's curious, this. Saul, we think of him sometimes as a selfish type of person or as a worldly type of person. But you've got to remember that Saul lived at a time when there was great poverty in Israel. Saul's idea of luxury was not what other people's idea of luxury was. For other rich men in Israel, having roast meat on the first day of the new month was a luxury. But for Saul as the king, his luxury was to have roast meat 2 days in the month. It's such modest luxury, isn't it? And Saul said, we're continuing with verse 27 now, and Saul said unto Jonathan his son, if anyone knows where David does, Jonathan does. Jonathan is a friend of David. And Saul says to him, wherefore, or why, cometh not the son of Jesse to meat, neither yesterday nor today? Well, it was usual to refer to people as the son of their father, David, son of Jesse. That was a usual way to refer to people. I wonder whether, though, Saul misses off David's name, because David, as a name, means in Hebrew, beloved. Maybe that is too tender a name for Saul in his anger to use against David. So he refers to David as the son of Jesse. He hasn't come to break bread with us. He didn't come yesterday. He's not come today. What's his reason? Why is he not here? Verse 28, and Jonathan answered Saul, David earnestly asked leave of me. To ask leave is to ask for permission. David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem, verse 29, and he said, let me go, I pray thee, for our family hath a sacrifice in the city. If we turn back to verse 6, we'll see that it says that was an annual sacrifice, a yearly sacrifice, a once-in-a-year opportunity for them to kill an animal and to enjoy roast meat together as a family, for all the brothers to be together, and for them to see their father again, who is now an old man. And so it's the most natural thing in the world for David to want to go to that sacrifice. He can only go once in the year. They're sacrificing a peace offering, just as Saul has been doing the last couple of days. They're sacrificing that animal and having that meal together. Let me go, I pray thee, Jonathan says, repeating David's words to Saul. For our family hath a sacrifice in the city, and my brother, he hath commanded me to be there. My brother, David had many brothers, as we've seen, but this is the eldest brother, who's taking responsibility for the family now that their father Jesse is an old man. He's ordered that David should be there, and so David had a conflict between attending the meal with King Saul, his ruler and his king, and the instruction given by his eldest brother, to whom David was responsible as well. And for that reason, David asked Jonathan for permission not to be at the king's meal. Jonathan continues to report David's words to Saul. And now, if I have found favour in thine eyes, let me get away, I pray thee, and see my brethren. If you approve of me, if my request is something that you, Jonathan, can approve of, David says, let me go so that I can see my brethren, my brothers, again. And then Jonathan continues with his explanation, having repeated David's words, and he tells Saul, therefore he, David, cometh not unto the king's table. He hasn't come to this meal because he requested permission to go to Bethlehem and to see his brothers. It seems a very reasonable request, but Saul, who wants to kill David, gets angry, extremely angry. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. It burned like a fire. And he said unto him, Saul says, thou son of the perverse, rebellious woman. How terrible. Saul is insulting Jonathan's mother. Saul is insulting and cursing his own wife, who he truly loves. Why? Because Saul wants to upset Jonathan. He could have insulted Jonathan himself, but he thought it would insult him more to upset him by hearing evil and nasty words about his mother. Thou son of the perverse, rebellious woman, that woman who does not behave herself, that woman who turns away to evil acts. That's what it means. Do I not know, says Saul, that thou hast chosen the son of Jesse? Do I not know? Of course I know about your friendship with the son of Jesse, that's with David. Of course I know about the love and the tenderness that you have in friendship towards him. And have you thought of the trouble it's causing? To thine own confusion, and unto the confusion of thy mother's nakedness. Once again, harsh and nasty words against Jonathan's mother to try and upset Jonathan more. To thine own confusion. Do you not realize that this is going to prevent you from becoming king? And your mother, who should have the honor in the future to be a king's mother, she is going to lose that due to your stupid friendship. And then Saul says something quite amazing in verse 31. For as long as the son of Jesse, David, liveth upon the ground, thou shalt not be established, nor thy kingdom. He is saying to Jonathan, Jonathan, you should be king after me. You have that right. You are entitled to be king, but you're never going to have your rule established. You're never going to rule as king if that man, David, the son of Jesse, remains alive. Oh, but I said this was something wonderful. Think about what it means. It means that Saul knows that the next king will be the king whom God has appointed. Therefore, the next king will be David. And so now we know the reason expressly for Saul's anger. He doesn't want David to be king. He is angry against David because God has chosen David to be king, and Saul wants control over it himself, even if he must die and his son Jonathan must become king. He does not want David to become king instead of him. But Jonathan, completely unselfish, dreams of the day when David, God's choice of king, will become king. Saul continues, end of verse 31. Wherefore now, send and fetch him unto me, for he shall surely die. That he shall surely die in the Hebrew is literally, he's a son of death. He's a child of death. Saul is continuing with this emotive language to express his meaning, as Saul often does in his speeches. He speaks in an emotional, powerful, and angry way. But he's met with anger from Jonathan, who cares about his friend. Verse 32. And Jonathan answered Saul his father, and said unto him, Wherefore shall he be slain? To be slain means to be killed. Wherefore means why. Why should he be killed? What hath he done? What wrong thing is David guilty of? There is no reason to be so angry with him, so cruel against him. He has only ever supported King Saul's rule. He has only ever risked his life to save the life of King Saul. And yet you want to kill him because of jealousy, because of ambition about your family. And so we've got an argument now between Saul and Jonathan, and the two of them getting more heated and more angry at this meal. And verse 33, Saul cast a javelin at him to smite him. He's already done that on 3 occasions to David, but this time Saul takes his javelin, his spear, a knife with a very long handle, and he throws it at Jonathan. He intends to smite him, to kill Jonathan. And when Jonathan knows that speaking on behalf of David is something that Saul would kill his own son for, then, end of verse 33, Jonathan knew that it was determined, it was decided definitely of his father to slay David. There was now no doubt in Jonathan's mind that Saul has made a definite decision that David must die. It's not just language. It's not just emotion. It's not just powerful words. It's not even just that evil spirit upsetting him. No, Saul really does want to kill David. And for that reason, in verse 34, Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger. Jonathan is so angry that he does not stay for that meal. Jonathan is so angry that he walks out at once in public to the shock of all of Saul's guests, and did eat no meat in the 2nd day of the month. He wouldn't break bread, not with his father, not with his family, not with his guests. He walks away from that meal on that 2nd day, for he was grieved, deeply sad, for David, because his father had done him shame. He was ashamed of his father's behaviour. He felt deep sorrow for David. And so Jonathan leaves that meal, and in verse 35, Jonathan had to perform his promise to warn David that he was in danger and that he must go away. Verse 35, and it came to pass in the morning, it happened the next morning, that Jonathan went out into the field at the time appointed with David and a little lad with him. I need to make a correction here of something I said in the previous talk. I said that their meeting was planned for the evening. I got that from verse 5, when David requests that he should hide himself in the field unto the 3rd day at even. That word even, although it literally means dusk, it can mean at night time. You remember Genesis 1:5, there was evening and there was morning, the first day, and so on, where evening stands for night. So what David is saying is that he will stay away until that night, when he will return to his hiding place, which has been arranged by the rock. And then early in the morning, Jonathan goes out to practice archery, to fire, to shoot arrows. And he brought with him a little lad. That word little can mean that he was small, young, but it also means that he was unimportant. He was a servant in the house of King Saul, just a servant boy, but he was unimportant. No one would notice him, no one would think anything much of him. Verse 36, and he said unto his lad, Run, find out now the arrows which I shoot. And as the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. I keep on commenting about the poverty of Saul's government. And here's another example of it. The arrows that Jonathan shoots can't be wasted. They have to be collected, even though he's the king's son. Those arrows have been handmade. They might be needed. None of them should be wasted. He has to have a boy with him who's going to watch where those arrows land, and he's going to collect them all up so that they can be used again. And end of verse 36, and as the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. That was what he arranged to warn David. If David was in danger, he would shoot an arrow beyond the position of this boy, so that the boy had to run off into the distance to collect it. That was a sign that there was danger for David. Verse 37, and when the lad was come to the place of the arrow which Jonathan had shot, presumably he's at the place of the target which Jonathan is aiming for, Jonathan then tells the boy to go further. Jonathan shouted after the lad and said, "Is not the arrow beyond thee? The arrow's further away from you. You have to run further to get that arrow." Verse 38, and Jonathan cried or shouted after the lad, "Make speed, haste, stay not." Make speed, run quickly, haste, hurry, stay not, don't delay. Jonathan is shouting these instructions to the boy about collecting these arrows, and this young, strong boy is running as fast as he can to collect Jonathan's arrows. But Jonathan is not giving those instructions really to the boy. Those instructions are for David. He's saying to David, make speed, haste, stay not, hurry away, you're in great danger. Don't wait even a moment. You've got to escape. And so he could shout this. He could shout this because anyone who was watching would think that he was shouting to that boy. But David, who's hiding behind the stone, the rock, in that field, David can hear these instructions, and he knows that Jonathan is warning him. And Jonathan's lad gathered up the arrows and came to his master, verse 39, but the lad knew not anything, only Jonathan and David knew the matter. Verse 40, and Jonathan gave his artillery unto his lad. The artillery is his weapons, his bow and his arrows. And he says to the lad, go, carry them to the city. So Jonathan is left alone, which is what Jonathan wants to do. Originally, the plan was just that he warns David with these instructions, but no, Jonathan cannot bear to do that. David is his friend. He cares intimately about David. He must speak to David, even if it's for one last time. So Jonathan sees his opportunity. No one's round. This boy is obedient. He will go back into the city and he will not realize what Jonathan is doing. Verse 41. And as soon as the lad was gone, David arose out of a place toward the south. That place, of course, is the rock which he's hiding behind, which is on the south side of Jonathan. And David fell on his face to the ground and bowed himself 3 times, and they kissed one another and wept with one another until David exceeded. They knew what this meant. They knew that this parting might be their last, that their friendship for the last 10 years could not continue. David falls on the ground and bows himself down. 3 times he does this to show honour to David, to give honour to Jonathan. And they kissed on the cheek to show their love for one another and how much they cared about each other and how much they wanted to be together. And they wept one with another. They wept. He bowed to give honour. He kissed to show love. He wept because of sorrow at their parting. Both men wept. Jonathan, although he was about 55, we think, at this time, and David about 25, they both wept. They both felt that deep, that terrible sadness, that bitter sadness of separation. And although Jonathan cried very much on this occasion, David cried even more at the loss of Jonathan who had looked after him so carefully and so well and supported him in everything. Verse 42, and Jonathan said to David, go in peace. Go And may God bless you. May God support you and grant you success. For as much as we have sworn, both of us, in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed, the family after them, and thy seed forever. They're separated, but their friendship continues. Their love continues. Their promises continue. And when they die, those promises must continue for future generations of their families, because God is between them as a witness of the promises, the oaths, the covenant that they have made with each other. That friendship must be remembered. That friendship must continue into future years and future generations. Whatever happens to Jonathan, whatever happens to David, they can't remain together. In fact, they will see each other again, but only once more. Chapter 23, verses 16 to 18. And their dream of the time when David would be king and Jonathan would support him in his rule, that will never be fulfilled. But David will rule as king. So Jonathan returns. He returns to carry out his duties for his father. He still has to look after his father. He still has to support him in government. He still has to fight in his army and to lead his army. Jonathan went into the city. But David has been separated for his future life. And so David arose and departed. Please do join me again next time when we shall have our 200th episode. I'm going to read you in a moment the passage we've just been looking at. First, though, my email address, 333kjv@gmail.com. That's 333kjv@gmail.com. Please do write. Tell me about yourself, which country you're in, if you're in the United States, which of the states. But now here, in conclusion, is the first book of Samuel, chapter 20, the verses we've been looking at, verses 24 to 42 from the King James Bible. So David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon was come, the king sat him down to eat meat. And the king sat upon his seat, as at other times, even upon a seat by the wall. And Jonathan arose, and Abner sat by Saul's side, and David's place was empty. Nevertheless, Saul spake not anything that day, for he thought, something hath befallen him. He's not clean. Surely he is not clean. And it came to pass on the morrow, which was the 2nd day of the month, that David's place was empty. And Saul said unto Jonathan his son, wherefore cometh not the son of Jesse to meat, neither yesterday nor today? And Jonathan answered Saul, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. And he said, let me go, I pray thee, for our family hath a sacrifice in the city, and my brother, he hath commanded me to be there. And now, if I have found favour in thine eyes, let me get away, I pray thee, and see my brethren. Therefore he cometh not unto the king's table. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan, and he said unto him, thou son of the perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that thou hast chosen the son of Jesse to thine own confusion, and unto the confusion of thy mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse liveth upon the ground, thou shalt not be established, nor thy kingdom. Wherefore now, send and fetch him unto me, for he shall surely die. And Jonathan answered Saul his father, and said unto him, Wherefore shall he be slain? What hath he done? And Saul cast a javelin at him to smite him, whereby Jonathan knew that it was determined of his father to slay David. So Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger, and did eat no meat in the 2nd day of the month, for he was grieved for David, because his father had done him shame. And it came to pass in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field at the time appointed with David, and a little lad with him. And he said unto his lad, Run, find out now the arrows which I shoot. And as the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the lad was come to the place of the arrow which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan cried after the lad, and said, Is not the arrow beyond thee? And Jonathan cried after the lad, Make speed, haste, stay not. And Jonathan's lad gathered up the arrows, and came to his master, but the lad knew not anything. Only Jonathan and David knew the matter. And Jonathan gave his artillery unto his lad, and said to him, Go, carry them to the city. And as soon as the lad was gone, David arose out of a place toward the south, and fell on his face to the ground, and bowed himself 3 times. And they kissed one another, and wept one with another, until David exceeded. And Jonathan said to David, Go in peace, for as much as we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, The Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed, forever. And he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city.